Hey everyone, Liz here, and today we are going to talk about brushes. Nail brushes are an essential tool when it comes to nail care, so I wanted to break down for you today everything you need to know about brushes. Okay, so with any nail art or regular application brush, they all have the same anatomy. We have the tip of the bristles, we have the belly of the bristles, and we have the heel of the bristles. The heel is right where those bristles enter the ferrule. The ferrule is this metal cylinder here. This is the part that attaches the bristles to the brush handle. And then we have the crimp. The crimp is right here on this brush, and this is the part that crimps the ferrule onto the handle of the brush. Brushes can be made of all different kinds of materials. Typically, these ferrules are nickel-plated brass to help them for corrosion purposes. So this nickel-plated brass prevents corrosion, and it also attaches to, in this case, a wood-handled brush that is painted with a specific branded color. Brush bristles can also be made out of lots of different materials. Typically, you'll find either natural bristle brushes made out of something like Kolinsky hair, as well as you'll find synthetic fiber brushes. And it's totally up to personal preference. I've used all different kinds of brushes, and I find that depending on the quality, they perform similarly. When a brush is brand new, they typically have some kind of glue or some type of light adhesive that they put on the bristles to keep them together. So whenever we prime a brush for the first time, we want to break up that glue adhesive, and we can also clean our brush and get it loaded with product. And I'll show you guys that in just a second. I just showed you a striper brush or a liner brush, but we also have application style brushes. So application brushes are going to be different shapes. Some people prefer square, some people prefer oval, some are squoval like this one where it has rounded edges, and you'll see different widths. The number of the brush refers to the size of the brush. Typically number 6 is the one that I like to use for all major applications. Some people like smaller brushes like a number 4, but number 4, 6, or 8 are going to be the most typical for any gel product application. And the important part about brushes is that we are using UV cured products. You're going to want to always keep your brushes capped. I actually just like to use regular building gels or whatever gels I finish with to actually clean and prep my brush for lid application. But most lids, one of the important things that a lot of people don't know, so inside the lid, there's going to be a little tension ring of some kind. This one has a plastic one. This one has a metal one. You can see the edge of that tension ring right there. If you shove your brush up inside of your lid too hard, you're going to move that tension ring that keeps the brush handle in the right position inside the lid. And that is how we end up messing up the tips of our brushes. So I'll show you guys how to put the lid back on properly. So whenever we're going to put the lid back on our brush, we want to make sure that all the bristles are as well aligned as possible. We can also use gel to do this with. But for the time being, I'm just going to show you how this works. So I'm going to take the lid, and I'm going to just be very careful about not rubbing the bristles on the sides as I put the lid on, the cap on. And I'm just going to give it a nice push like that to secure the lid onto the handle. Depending on the brush style, some of them have an actual physical stop on the handle. So with this one, what I can do is just gently push that on, and then this ring is going to stop me from shoving the lid down too far. But with any of the brushes like this that are just using a tension ring with a lid, and you have to kind of just use pressure, if I really force this handle inside of my brush lid, I'm going to shove that plastic tension ring up inside the lid, and I'm going to ruin the lid and make it impossible for this to stay. You can also apply, if you're dealing with some that are really tricky, you can also apply some masking tape, which also helps to identify which brush you're using, whether it be for color gels, glitter gels, etc. You can do some washi tape, masking tape, any type of tape to create that extra buffer here. You can wrap your brushes if you'd like to. So I have some form backing paper. You can use wax paper, you can use a silicone mat, whatever you want to use. I just ripped some of this off really quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some clear gel It doesn't really matter what type of clear gel. You do want it to be a lighter viscosity, so you want it to be a little bit thinner so that you can actually work it into the brush. And I'm going to start with my application brush. So if we were using this brush for the first time, I would put some clear gel on a little piece of foreign paper like this, and I am going to work some clear gel into the bristles of my brush. So I just pat my brush into the gel. I also try to make sure I don't get gel all the way up onto the ferrule. So you'll see right here, I keep the gel away from the crimp and away from the ferrule. We don't want to load gel up inside the heel of the brush where we can't get it out. But what I do is I use it almost like a spatula. So I'm not painting like this. I'm not roughing up the bristles. I'm using my brush almost as if it's a spatula, and I always pull in one direction away from the bristles so that they stay nice and aligned, okay? So you can see my brush now responds much nicer. It actually is very malleable, and if I put any pressure on it, all the bristles stay together, but it is kind of what I like to call it warmed up now. Now, before I put my brush away, what I like to do is I will squeegee out any excess product. You can do this simply by just wiping on a clean area of your mat or on foreign paper like I'm doing here, or you can also use a nail wipe to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my brush down in the wipe. I'm going to layer the wipe over, and I'm just going to pull away and push down with my finger to kind of squeegee any excess product off of my brush. Then what I can do is I can just gently pull and tap on the sides to kind of tuck my brush into a nice shape. You can see I've tucked the bristles in, and then now I'm ready to put my lid back on. So I'm just going to be very cautious when I put the lid on, make sure I don't rub the bristles, and there you have the perfect way to put away your brushes. I recommend storing your brushes laying on their side or upside down just to keep the product from running into that ferrule. If we have a lot of product on our brush bristles and we have it standing upright like this, it's possible that any gel is going to run down into the ferrule. So I like to store my brushes upside down or laying flat in a drawer or in some type of container. You definitely want to keep your brushes away from UV light at all times. This is something that even if you're using, like I said, gel nail cleanser that doesn't have photo initiators in it, which there are some of those gel brush cleansers out there, you do want to keep your brushes away from UV light, open windows, halogen bulbs, any source of light that could be a potential curing source for your brushes, because it is possible that there's gel residue either at the heel of those bristles because you've been working with it. There's possibility that there's gel in the heel of the brush. Maybe some of the gel got down into the ferrule, and the curing process can actually carry through to areas that are not exposed. So if you expose the bristles of your brush to UV light, it is possible for that polymerization reaction to carry on through to other areas of your brush that maybe you can't see and cure the base of your bristles, which is going to make your brush very stiff. Okay, so with a liner brush, you can see that these bristles of my liner brush are kind of sticking out. So this really helps to get those bristles put back together. So same thing. What I like to do is pretend that any long liner brush like this is a fountain pen. I'm going to basically press the bristles and wiggle them to get gel to soak in between all those bristles. So you're going to kind of like work some gel in between until you can see it kind of soak up through each individual hair. And then I'm going to pull through, and I can use sort of a twisting to get these to all go back together, okay? So same thing, you want to keep the gel away from the ferrule, keep it, just with a little bit of space in between, and then this is going to help you keep your liners from getting bent and misshapen. You can also use the same squeegee technique with a nail wipe. So just put your brush on the wipe and just squeegee any excess product out of the brush. It might make it a little bit flat like it just did. And then what you can do is on your clean surface, again, just kind of twist and pat those different sides into more of a cone. With liner brushes, we always want to make sure that they're in a perfect cylindrical cone shape. We don't want them to be flat. We don't want any side to be more elongated than the other. So always try to make sure that you kind of think of your liner brushes as a cone and or a cylinder, and we want to make sure that all of those bristles are evenly adjusted within that cylinder shape. Okay, so same thing, then I can put my brush cap back on. Now you guys might be wondering, well, I have this liner brush. Let's say I like this liner brush for thicker lines, but I want something for thinner lines. I want a brush that I can customize and make it a little bit skinnier so I can do really, really fine details. Well, let me show you some techniques you can use to trim your brushes down to customize them for nail art. Okay, so I have this brush here that is a little bit too thick for my personal preference, so I'm going to customize this brush. Now remember what I told you about thinking of your liner brushes, especially, the opening is going to be a round opening, and it's going to be hosting a cylinder of bristles that come out from the liner brush. So rather than just trimming from the side and one side only and creating kind of a ribbon of bristles, I want to keep thinking about my bristles as a round cylindrical shape. So even if I'm going to trim out individual hairs, I'm always going to be turning my brush as I do it to get a nice even cut. So I'm going to use some very sharp nippers here. Remember what I said about using nippers for skin and also tools. So these are ones that I have reserved for this particular purpose. You can use scissors, you can use any type of really refined nipper, but you're going to want something that allows you to kind of segment out individual hairs. And so you can use your nippers to kind of start to separate some of those hairs so you can see which strands and how much thickness you want to take out. So I'm just going to separate these just a little bit, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to trim a couple hairs at a time. So I'm going to try and segment out some hairs, and I'm going to nip off as close to the base of the brush as possible, right where that heel is. And I'm just going to squeeze and peel off a couple of hairs, okay? So that's about how many I've cut off, maybe 3 or 4 in one go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my brush a quarter turn, and then I can trim a couple more. Keep an eye on how thin the actual tip of your brush is getting as you do this to make sure that you're not over trimming your brush. Again, I'm going to rotate a quarter turn. You can see where I trimmed at the base. You can see this little gap right here. That little stump is where I trimmed off some bristles. So I'm going to turn that a quarter turn, and then I can trim off a few more. And this is a great way to customize your brushes. You know, you can buy the same brush and just customize them to different thicknesses. So if you like a specific length of brush, if you like a specific brand, you can buy just one brush if you want to and customize them to different lengths and then label them differently. So again, quarter turn. I'm just going to nip off just a few bristles at a time, okay? And so you can see it's getting much more slender. Now what I like to do when I'm doing this is I like to rotate the brush and kind of look at it from all angles and see if it's starting to turn into the kind of shape that I want. If anything looks like it's starting to become kind of a ribbon where it's flat on one side, I will then go to the opposite side and trim off a few more. So like over here, I can see the little stump of where I already trimmed on the left. I haven't trimmed any on the right, so I'm going to go over here to make sure that it stays nice and round. Okay? Can you see that? So I was able to trim off quite a few bristles. I'll show you. So this is the little haircut that I just gave my brush. And you can see how I'm starting to create that nice slender tip that I want on the brush tip like that. And you can keep working this until you get down to, you know, the thickness that you want. But I will say that there is such a thing as too thin. So unless you're going to be doing super, super fine hair thickness lines, you do want to have some bristles here because that's what's going to actually, like I was saying, a fountain pen, that's what's going to be able to load up with product and give you the ability to do those stripes and line art that you're looking for. So I can use this same brush, I can use the belly of this brush to create thicker lines. I can use the very, very tip of the brush to create super fine details. But the length of this brush is what I love because I'm going to actually be able to load up the length just like a fountain pen with product, and I'm going to be able to work on whatever nail art for a good while without running out or having lines that break. And we'll talk about this more as we get into actual nail art, but I wanted to at least call this out. This is one of the common mistakes that people make when trying to customize their brushes, is they don't think about it as a cylinder. They just cut from one side, and that ends up giving you a very, very flat ribbon-like brush that isn't as helpful. Okay, so what happens if you mess up your nail brush? This is one where the cap got smashed onto it and it is completely misshapen, and this needs to be fixed. So all I'm going to use is a cup of hot water. It doesn't have to be boiling, but I do recommend it's hot enough that you see steam coming off of it. This is going to be the best temperature for working with bent brushes. Okay, so here's my bent brush. I'm just going to dip the bristles into the hot water, and you can see it's already fixing it. So you can even clamp the brush onto the edge of a cup if you want to leave it for a little bit. Usually this process doesn't take very long. And you can submerge even just the heel of the brush too, like right here where the ferrule starts. Heating that base up sometimes helps to loosen anything that might be in the heel of your brush and get it out of there. Okay, so you can see just in a few seconds I was able to straighten the bristles of my brush. They're no longer curled. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a nail wipe and again squeegee off any excess moisture. So there's my nice straight brush. And then I can go back and I can work some clear gel into my brush bristles and just kind of wiggle and pull. This will help work any like hardened color out or get rid of anything that's kind of making the brush funky, and it will also glue those bristles kind of back together. And I use the word glue loosely because I don't actually mean like glue where it's dry and hard. I just mean it's going to help kind of get them all organized and nice and slicked back together. Okay, so same thing, I'm going to kind of twist and pull, get it back into a nice cylinder shape. And I kind of focus on the very, very, very tip of the brush to make sure that any of those little bristles at the end get straightened as much as possible. And so there I have my brush all fixed and straightened, and I can put my cap back on with just a little bit of gel left on the bristles. This is going to kind of train those bristles to stay straight again. And like I said, make sure that you haven't shoved the tension ring back up inside of your brush lid. Make sure that that's still in place, and then I can just simply put the lid back on, and now I'm ready to store my brush. So I hope these tidbits about brushes have helped you understand a little bit more about the anatomy of your nail brush, as well as some tips and tricks as to how to keep them in their best condition. Brushes can be expensive, so we want to make sure we understand how to handle them in the best way to keep them lasting for a very long time. I still have brushes that I've had from 8 to 10 years ago. They're still in great shape. And again, as we go through our actual application, some of my nail art videos, and all of the other education that I'm going to post here within the Nail Hub TV, you guys are definitely going to get exposed to a lot more information and a lot more hands-on application of this knowledge. But I always think it's important to teach those fundamental core concepts so you have that in the back of your mind as we move forward. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.